My name is Claudine Mercer. At 71, I like to think of myself as steady, maybe even stubborn. A retired librarian. I live by lists and small rituals, morning coffee in my chipped blue mug, crossword puzzles, a short walk to keep my knees from stiffening. Life in Albuquerque has its rough edges, but I've always believed if you mind your own business, the world will leave you in peace. That belief cracked the afternoon I stopped by Don Mateo's dry cleaner. The place has been on Central Avenue for as long as I can remember, with the same hand-painted sign and the same faint smell of starch and steam drifting out onto the sidewalk. My son, Daniel, had pressed a yellow slip of paper into my hand that morning. "Could you pick up my coat?" "Mom, I'm running late for a meeting, just another errand." I thought. I tucked it between the pages of my grocery list and forgot about it until later. Inside, the bell over the door chimed. Don Mateo was behind the counter, his glasses sliding down the bridge of his nose. He looked older than the last time I saw him, but his eyes still carried that familiar warmth, at least at first. I handed him the ticket. He read the number, then paused. For a moment, he didn't move at all. His fingers twitched against the counter. And when he finally looked up, the warmth was gone. "Senora Mercer," he murmured, his voice dry as paper. "Come with me." Before I could ask why, he took my arm gently but firmly and drew me behind the counter, past a curtain that smelled of bleach. His hands shook as he pulled open a drawer. From it, he lifted a small plastic bag, sealed tight. Inside lay a bank transfer slip, stamped in red ink with a number so large my mind stumbled over it. Beneath the slip was a photograph. Lucia and Ben, my grandchildren. Their faces were circled in red marker, jagged and furious. I felt the floor tilt beneath me. Don Mateo's whisper rasped close to my ear. "Take your grandchildren and leave before dawn. Do not wait." The bag crinkled in my hand, sharp as glass. As the ordinary world I knew split open, I drove home with my heart thundering so hard I thought it might echo off the car windows. The plastic bag Don Mateo had pressed into my palm felt heavier than bricks in my purse. Every block of familiar street looked strange, as if the whole city had turned on its side. Daniel was away on one of his endless business trips. He hadn't said much beyond that, just left a note on the counter for me to watch the kids. Most weeks I didn't mind. They were my light. But tonight, the shadows in the corners of the house felt sharper. Lucia and Ben were asleep in their rooms, their small breaths steady. I forced myself to move quietly, opening drawers and closets. I packed in silence a few changes of clothes, their favorite pajamas, a bag of crackers, apples, a thermos of water, the birth certificates and insurance cards I kept in a locked box. From the toy bin, I slipped in Ben's red truck and Lucia's threadbare rabbit. Things that would remind them of home when home became something we couldn't go back to. By midnight, I stood at their doors, shaking inside. I whispered first to Lucia, brushing her shoulder gently. "Sweetheart, wake up. We're going on a little adventure." Her eyes blinked wide, then softened into curiosity. Ben stirred next, grumbling, until I promised he could bring his truck along. I'd already called Rosa, my old friend from the clinic. She never asked for details, only said, 10 minutes. I know a driver. True to her word, a discreet taxi idled by the curb with its lights dimmed. We slipped out into the chill of the night, the children bundled in sweaters. Rosa hugged me briefly at the door. Her eyes searched mine, and I knew she sensed the truth I couldn't speak. The taxi carried us through empty streets until the neon sign of the Greyhound station glowed ahead. I bought 3 tickets north, my hands trembling against the counter. On the bus, Lucia giggled at the idea of traveling past midnight. Ben pressed his face to the window. The toy truck clutched to his chest. I sat between them, holding each small hand, fighting back tears. I was taking them away from danger, but the thought burned inside me. The danger might be their own father. The bus rolled into Santa Fe just as the horizon lightened, painting the adobe walls in pale pink. I gathered the children, stiff and half asleep, and led them across the quiet street to a roadside motel. The clerk didn't ask questions, just slid a key across the counter when I paid in cash. The room was small, 2 sagging beds and a faded rug, but it felt like a fortress compared to the storm in my chest. I tucked Ben into one bed, his toy truck still locked in his hand. Lucia curled beside him, the rabbit pressed under her chin. Within minutes, they were breathing evenly again. I sat on the other bed with the plastic bag on my lap. My fingers hesitated before unsealing it. The transfer slip stared back at me, $500,000, wired to a company I'd never heard of. The numbers at the bottom looked like a code, precise and deliberate. Beneath it, the photograph of my grandchildren glared, the circles drawn in angry red. My stomach tightened. I thought of Daniel, my only child, the boy who once built forts out of cardboard boxes in the living room, who cried into my blouse the night his father died. Could he be tangled in something that put his own children in danger? The thought alone made my throat burn. I needed someone who could see clearly when I could not. I picked up the phone and dialed Rosa. My voice shook, but she didn't press. "I know someone you trust," she said gently. "Father Luis. He's still at San Miguel. Do you want me to call him minutes later?" The phone rang. His voice came through, older and rougher than I remembered, but steady as stone. "Claudine, I will listen," he said after I stumbled through the story. "Bring nothing to the police yet. There is a young attorney in our parish, Fernanda Reyes. She is discreet, and she understands cases like this. Speak with her." After we hung up, I sat in silence, staring at the children's sleeping faces. My heart wanted to believe Daniel was innocent, but the bag on my lap whispered a darker truth. I met Father Luis at the side door of San Miguel Mission the next afternoon. The church's old adobe walls glowed under the New Mexico sun, and stepping inside felt like entering another time quiet, cool and steady. Beside him stood a woman I didn't know. She was younger than I expected, maybe mid-30s, with cropped dark hair and eyes that didn't flinch. "This is Fernanda Reyes," Father Luis said. "She's an attorney. And more importantly, she can be trusted." Fernanda offered her hand, firm and warm. We settled into a small office near the sacristy. I set the plastic bag on the desk between us. My voice trembled as I explained where it came from. The dry cleaner, the warning, the children asleep upstairs in the motel. Fernanda didn't interrupt. She slipped on a pair of thin gloves, opened the bag carefully, and drew out the transfer slip. From her satchel, she pulled a sleek laptop. Her fingers moved quickly across the keyboard, pulling up databases I couldn't begin to understand. "This routing code," she murmured, zooming in on a line of numbers, "matches a shell corporation flagged last year. They've been used to move funds through casinos in Nevada and property purchases in Texas." She tapped again, then froze. "And here, see the signature, see Herrera." The name caught Father Luis's attention too. His eyes narrowed. "Who is that?" I asked, my chest tightening. "Cortez Herrera," Fernanda said quietly, "known to federal investigators for laundering and, more recently, suspected ties to trafficking operations along the border." I gripped the edge of the desk. My mind flashed to Daniel, his sudden business trips, the way he'd avoid my questions with a half smile and a vague answer. I had told myself he was simply chasing opportunities, trying to build something for his family. Now those memories felt jagged, dangerous. Fernanda leaned forward. Mrs. Mercer, we need to proceed carefully. This isn't just fraud, if Herrera's involved. The stakes are far higher. I nodded, though my body felt like stone. Inside, I was breaking apart Mother's love, pulling one way. Grandmother's duty pulling the other. The photo of my grandchildren lay on the desk, their faces circled in red. Between them and my son, I knew a choice was coming. I left the children with Rosa in Santa Fe, telling them Grandma had errands in town. My hands shook on the steering wheel as I drove south. The long stretch of I-25 unraveling under the desert sky. Every mile closer to Albuquerque pressed heavier on my chest. Daniel's house sat quiet on its cul-de-sac, blinds drawn against the midday sun. I used the spare key he had once given me, telling me cheerfully, "You never know when I'll need rescuing." Mom. The lock clicked open now like a secret I had no right to hold. Inside, the air was stale, heavy with the scent of cologne and paper dust. I went straight to the bedroom closet. I remembered a night months ago when Daniel, half drunk on bourbon, had laughed and told me, "Don't worry, Ma, if you ever need cash, the code's just our wedding date, Euro 518. At the time, I brushed it off as careless chatter. Now it was my only thread. The safe was a squat, gray box wedged against the back wall. My fingers trembled as I punched in the numbers. A mechanical click echoed in the silence, so loud it made my breath catch. The door swung open. Inside lay stacks of $100 bills, bound with neat paper bands. Beside them, a fan of passports and driver's licenses with strangers' names, but Daniel's face staring back. 2 unopened prepaid cell phones sat in their plastic shells. And at the bottom, 3 airline tickets. Daniel Mercer, Lucia Mercer, Benjamin Mercer, departure from Dallas, destination Madrid. My eyes scanned the papers again. There was no ticket for his wife. My knees weakened. I clutched the doorframe for balance. Bile rising in my throat. I didn't touch a thing. Instead, I pulled my phone from my bag, snapping photo after photo with the flash muted. The sound of the shutter was a guilty whisper in the stillness. When I closed the safe, I nearly collapsed with relief, though the weight inside me only grew. In the car, I emailed every image to Fernanda, fingers fumbling over the screen. Within minutes, her reply came, "Stay put. I'm alerting a federal contact." The highway shimmered outside my windshield, but I barely saw it. Daniel hadn't just hidden money. He had prepared to move his children across an ocean, away from everything and everyone they knew. And I was the one who had uncovered it. Fernanda met me outside the parish office the next morning. Her expression clipped, her steps quick. Beside her walked 2 men in plain clothes. Their jackets hung heavy, though the sun was already hot. And when they introduced themselves, Special Agent Morales and Special Agent Keene, I felt the ground tilt again. We sat in a narrow conference room, a crucifix hanging above the table like a silent witness. Morales spread out the printed photos I had taken of Daniel's safe. His tone was calm, but every word hit like a blow. "Mrs. Mercer, this isn't just fraud or gambling debts. Your son has been moving money for people tied to trafficking networks. Herrera's name connects directly to ongoing federal cases. The cash and IDs you photographed are consistent with flight preparation. The children's tickets indicate leverage." "Leverage?" I asked, though I already knew. Keene leaned forward, his eyes steady. "Your son owes money he can't repay. They've demanded his cooperation. The children are insurance if he doesn't deliver. They'll take them. If he does, they'll disappear overseas." My hands went cold. I stared at the photos, at Daniel's name printed beside Lucia's and Ben's. My boy had placed them on paper like cargo. Fernanda spoke gently. They need your help. Claudine, there's a way to stop this, but it will be hard. Morales nodded. We propose a controlled sting. The children remain hidden, under protection. We let Daniel believe they're missing. He'll make contact with his handlers. Every word, every move, will be evidence. I gripped the edge of the table. You're asking me to stand by while my son destroys himself. No, Keene said, voice low. We're asking you to stand by so your grandchildren survive. Silence filled the room, broken only by the hum of the old ceiling fan. I thought of Daniel as a boy, clumsy and eager, running across the yard with his baseball glove. I thought of the man who now carried debts and secrets dark enough to risk his own children. I felt something inside me fracture. But when I lifted my chin, my voice was clear. Keep them safe. Do what you must. The agents gathered their files, and Fernanda touched my arm. Her eyes softened, though her words were steady. You've just saved their lives. I nodded, though inside I felt hollow. Saving them meant watching Daniel fall into a trap he had set for himself. The motel room smelled faintly of detergent and old carpet. I sat on the edge of the bed, phone in my hand, Daniel's number glowing on the screen. My thumb hovered over the green button. One word from me and I could warn him, give him a chance to escape what was coming. The urge nearly swallowed me whole. He was still my boy. I could see him at 6 years old, standing nervously in the doorway of his classroom, clutching my hand too tight until the teacher pried him gently away. I could see him at 15, bent over homework by the kitchen lamp, his brow furrowed in the same stubborn way his father's had been. And I could see him the night his father died, burying his face against my blouse, his sobs soaking the fabric as I whispered, I've got you. Danny, I'll always keep you safe. My hand trembled. The message I typed was simple. Daniel, be careful. They know. I stared at the words until they blurred. Then I lifted my head and looked across the room. Lucia was curled on her side, the rabbit pressed under her chin. Ben had rolled halfway off the bed, his toy truck trapped in his fist, mouth open in the deep breathing of untroubled sleep. They were the reason. Their faces, circled in red on that photograph, were the reason I couldn't press send. With a sharp breath, I held down the delete button. The words vanished, leaving the screen blank. Tears spilled hot down my cheeks. Dropping onto my lap, my chest ached with the weight of it. For the first time in my life, I understood that saving my son might mean losing them. And that was a price I could not pay. The van rattled as we pulled off the interstate, stopping behind a cluster of weeds and half-broken fencing. Ahead, a low-slung roadside motel glowed with a tired neon sign, buzzing pink against the dark. The agents moved with quiet precision, checking radios, whispering codes I barely understood. Morales glanced back at me once, his eyes steady. You'll hear everything, he said, sliding a headset over my ears. From the surveillance feed, I saw Daniel's car roll into the lot, headlights sweeping across cracked asphalt. My breath caught. He looked frantic as he climbed out, hair disheveled, shirt wrinkled, movements sharp with fear. He paced, then stopped when another car pulled in beside him. A man in a leather jacket stepped out, broad and watchful. The wire on Daniel's shirt carried their voices into the van. You're late, the courier said, low and clipped. Daniel's words tumbled out in a rush. I can still deliver. Just give me more time. Please. Time. The courier spat the word. Herrera doesn't wait. Where are the kids? The sound of that question nearly crushed me. My throat closed, but I forced myself to keep listening. Daniel stammered. They're safe. I'll get them to you. Just don't cut me off, I can fix this. Keen gave a nod. The van filled with quiet static before a command crackled through Alpha Team. Move! The motel lot erupted. Spotlights flared. Boots thundered against pavement. Voices barked orders. SWAT agents streamed from the shadows. Weapons raised. The courier lunged toward his car, but was tackled to the ground in seconds. Daniel froze in the chaos. His hands shot up, then faltered. He dropped to his knees, sobbing, his voice carrying through the wire. I didn't mean God. I didn't mean this. I pressed both palms over my face, but the sounds still reached me. The slap of cuffs, the sharp orders, my son's broken cries. When the van door opened, the desert air rushed in. Thick with dust and sirens, I stayed rooted to my seat, caught between heartbreak and a grim, undeniable relief. The courtroom was chilled, the air humming faintly with the buzz of fluorescent lights. Daniel sat at the defense table in the same wrinkled shirt he'd worn the night of his arrest. His shoulders sagged as though every bone carried extra weight. When the judge asked for his statement, he spoke without looking at me. He admitted to debts he couldn't repay, to men who cornered him with threats that grew sharper each week. He said he was desperate, that he never truly meant for his children to be harmed. His voice cracked when he said their names. But on the screen beside him, the prosecutors displayed the photos from the safe tickets marked with their identities. Cash stacked in neat rows. Coded messages tying him to Herrera's men. His denials dissolved against evidence too solid to ignore. The lead prosecutor spoke plainly. Daniel could plead guilty to lesser charges if he testified against Herrera's network. Without that cooperation, he would face decades behind bars. His lawyer whispered at his side. And finally, Daniel nodded, broken, agreeing to trade his last shield of pride for the chance at a lighter sentence. I sat in the gallery, silent, my hand clenching around Lucia's worn rabbit doll I'd brought for comfort. The fabric was thin, the stitching frayed, but I held it as though it could keep me steady. I didn't cry. My tears had dried the night I heard his voice begging in that motel lot. When the gavel fell, the custody papers were signed. My grandchildren were placed formally in my care. Daniel would be allowed supervised visits in prison once the state deemed it safe. The doll trembled in my hands as I rose to leave, torn between the ache of a mother and the fierce resolve of a grandmother who would not let them be lost again. The seasons turned, and with them, our lives. By spring, we were settled in Santa Fe. The children enrolled at the little elementary school a few blocks from our apartment. Each morning, I walked them down the tree-lined street, their backpacks bouncing, their voices bright with songs and stories. Teachers told me they were thriving, their laughter returning piece by piece. I found my own rhythm again, too. The local library welcomed me as a volunteer, and soon I began a small program for seniors, teaching them how to recognize scams, how to guard against the kind of coercion that had wrapped itself around Daniel. Sharing what I had learned made the pain feel less wasted, as if something useful could grow from it. Evenings were quieter now. We cooked simple meals, read stories together, and tucked into our modest routines. There were moments when a memory of Daniel would rise unbidden, a smile across the dinner table, the sound of his footsteps as a boy and I would falter. But then I'd hear Lucia's giggle or see Ben clutching his red truck, and I'd remember why we had survived. One night, as the sun dropped low, I took them to the park. They crouched in the fading light with a box of sidewalk chalk, drawing crooked lines across the pavement. When they finished, they called me over. At my feet stretched a wide circle, uneven but strong, enclosing hearts and stars. It's our safe circle. Lucia said proudly, her rabbit tucked under one arm. Ben nodded, his hands dusted blue. I stood there, breath catching, and thought my son carried poison in his coat pocket. But I refused to let it spill into my grandchildren's future. The chalk ring glowed faintly as dusk deepened a circle of protection, not danger.